Well, another edition of Lucky White Men. This is Steven Soderbergh. I'm here with Steve Gaghan. And I should mention, first of all, that this typeface was stolen from All the President's Men. I think it's Helvetica Light. And that's certainly a film we had in mind when we were having our conversations, which stretch back quite a while, actually. I remember shooting The Limey, and you and I were talking every week.
Yeah, we were getting together every once in a while and talking about what we wanted for the movie.
And one of the big issues with any movie is how to start. And I know in the script, we started in the courtroom. And even I think the first cut of the film, we started with Michael in the courtroom and then decided that Mexico was sort of a more intriguing way to begin the movie because it wasn't like everything you'd seen before.
It's interesting because originally when we started talking and early on in my first draft, you had the idea of actually, we were going to start with a drug tunnel. I don't know if you remember.
Right.
We had an air conditioning repairman just driving through the desert, and he hops out wearing like a Freon suit, and he disappeared into a hole, and he was going to walk underneath this drug tunnel and like repair the air conditioning.
Right.
20-mile tunnel. I know you had the idea of
it was an image. It was an image that we both liked a lot, but we just couldn't figure out how to implement it. So we ended up with this, which, if I'm not mistaken, was based on a real event that Tim had told us about a young cop who had basically orchestrated a bust on his own and then got stopped by a posse of Suburbans, and this basically took place. His a superior took the contraband from him, and the young cop was sort of at a loss as to what to do. We can talk a little bit about the look of the Mexico sequence, which was the result of a lot of testing. But one of the things that's most apparent as you watch it now is the 45-degree shutter, which creates this sort of strobing effect when the camera moves. It also eats up a lot of light, 2 stops of light. And since we were trying to overexpose as much as possible, even though we were out in the middle of the desert, we ended up shooting at a very, very low f-stop. Where were we? Las Cruces, I think. New Mexico is where this desert stuff was shot. I stole that from Duel, I think. Steven Spielberg's truck movie. I always find these kind of scenes sort of tricky to do, especially because we were trying to go for a very run and gun feeling, and yet you want to cover them in a way that feels detailed and has some amount of energy to it. And it was tough sometimes to find this balance between being too slick and also wanting it to feel rough. Here comes Tomas Milian. Did you write that little song into the script that he's in?
No, but he's incredible. The Salazar character is based heavily on a real character from the Mexican military, General Rebollo, and I think Tomas Milian came up with his own spin on it.
It was pretty fascinating. I remember Tomas came up to me at one point and he had an idea for something he was going to do with his cane. And he said, well, I'd like to do this and maybe this other thing. And I was sort of looking at him and nodding. And he said, you don't like this idea? I said, no, I'm just trying to plug it into the rest of the movie to make sure it works. And he says, you're not very emotional, are you? I said, well, it's sometimes. He says, I understand. I am the emotion. You're the intellect. You let me know what you want to do. I said, thanks. I appreciate that. He was
division of labor.
Yeah, I know.
Pero para ser un oficial de la judicial, estás muy bien enterado.
So when we were out here in the desert, I was trying to strip the crew down, although we didn't have a very big crew, I think, by Hollywood standards, certainly. And we're running 2 cameras almost all the time, so we were moving pretty quickly.
I remember we spent a lot of time talking about which cartel is which, who's working for whom, whose cocaine is that, with the scorpion stamped on the side.
Yeah, and I really missed an opportunity, actually, that bugs me every time I see the film when Topher Grace and Erica Christensen are doing the crack thing. You know, the packet that he unfolds has the scorpion on it, and I should have shot an insert of that. I never did. It was really stupid.
Your client didn't use as much sense in choosing what he planned.
We're in Ohio now. This was an abandoned, not abandoned, just unused courtroom building that they found for us. And we walked in and shot it as is. This is all available light. Not a single watt of light was provided by us. You'll notice the blue tint, which is the result of not using an 85 filter with tungsten film. Tungsten you would shoot at night normally. We're shooting it during the day without a filter to correct. And it results in this very extreme blue look. You know, it was just hopefully a way to help distinguish one storyline from another. Because I think we talked a lot about how are we going to keep everybody straight and how are they going to stay oriented. And so I was kind of looking for anything I could find to help.
This Michael Douglas's character, I did a lot of research talking to a friend of my parents growing up. I'm from Kentucky, which is near Cincinnati, but the federal judge for this circuit is a friend of my family's, and I would call him up and when I was writing the script and
I remember that, yeah.
Ask him questions, and he would give me these answers that were so beautiful and so well thought out, and there was no way to put them in the movie.
Well, I mean, Robert was tough. I mean, we were just talking about how in the early drafts, if you made him too gung-ho, if he was this guy who walked in and thought he knew everything and was going to solve this problem, then he seemed like a jerk. And if he came in and he wasn't that way, he seemed too passive. And it was kind of tricky trying to make him active and yet also portray him as someone who admits that he's walking into a situation that he doesn't have all the answers to.
We tried him as a professor who was writing a paper, who was studying the issue for the government, and that put him too far out of the action. We tried a lot of different things with this character.
Draft after draft.
You just don't tell any jokes. What do you mean I'm telling a joke, bro? Don't tell jokes. I got a giveaway, Ray. It's not a giveaway. Every time you tell a joke, it's a giveaway. Don't tell them. You know what the problem is, bro? You are too...
Don Cheadle and Louis Guzman, who actually, even, I think, certainly during when you were writing, but very early on, I had imagined them playing these parts because the whole point was to, you know, they needed to have a rapport that is evident. And I'd worked with Don and Louis separately and just felt they would get on together, and they really did.
A lot of the people I've talked to in law enforcement who've seen this, a lot of the DEA people that we interviewed and talked to, they've said that, they love, you spend so much time in a van when you're doing observation, and you get to know your partner like nobody else. And it's like a perverse marriage, and they nailed it.
Oh, that's good.
What's up, Ed? We gonna move some weight or what? You guys ever brought
Miguel Ferrer, who I've always liked a lot, and who I feel we don't get to see as often as we would like, and playing a character that I think is kind of interesting because one of the problems that we faced was how do you get all the various points of view articulated in a way that isn't too naked. And one of the solutions I feel like we found was to give sort of speeches and positions to characters who are not necessarily sympathetic. And as a result, Ruiz ends up sort of saying a lot of things that are true that you're not accustomed to having an unsympathetic character voice in a movie.
He's one of my favorite characters in the movie. I love the way he tees off on the global politics of the drug war.
And you also get the sense later on, I think, through dawn, even after Louis Guzman has been killed, that there is a sort of grudging respect, because Ruiz is not unintelligent, but is just playing on the other side of the fence.
Come on, just one more, relax. Guy goes, gets a tattoo put on his penis. One side says yes, the other side says no, right?
Tattooed on his penis?
Yeah.
Did you write this joke? I can't remember.
I wrote another joke, and they came up with this joke. Or maybe they used my joke and another joke. I can't remember.
I can't remember either. Now this shootout, oh my God. I wanted it to be sort of ideally orchestrated chaos, which ends up being a little more difficult to achieve than you might think. And I actually went back on 2 separate occasions to pick up some shots that you see in this sequence, because I felt we didn't have the kind of stuff we needed. I mean, it's kind of, we would run 3 cameras in that situation. We had a guy from San Diego actually who worked for NFL Films come in for a day. And basically you say, well, I want it to look like you're not sure what you're looking at or what to focus on.
This was one of my favorite and earliest sort of ideas for the film, was that you could have this sort of law enforcement clusterfuck happening in a strip plaza or a strip mall where there's a Chuck E. Cheese down the street, and that it's just sort of an ordinary day going on, and suddenly there's 30 agents all shooting at each other, and the bad guy hides out in a kid's pizza parlor.
Yeah, right. There was actually in the script even another set of agents watching from a building across the railroad track, these FBI guys, and I did shoot that, but I found that when we were cutting it together that I was so confused that I just dropped it.
There's our character, Spastic Jack, selling root beer or something.
That's right. That's right. I forgot we had him in there. We started shooting the film in San Diego, and the look for San Diego, I wanted to be very sort of a little desaturated, but more importantly, sort of blown out, this kind of nuclear sunlight. And we tried to augment that by doing 2 things. One, there are fairly heavy filters on the camera, diffusion filters, and also a technique that's called flashing, where you expose the negative through the camera, and before the negative is developed in the lab, it is re-exposed to a preset amount of white light. And it was a technique that was used a lot in the 70s. It was really pioneered by Vilmos Zsigmond when he started working with Robert Altman on McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and they did several pictures together where they used flashing. Very, very unpredictable process, though. I'd say of the 4 weeks of shooting in San Diego, we reshot 3.5, 4 days worth of material because it was so difficult to calculate how one shot would be fine, another shot would be so washed out that you couldn't use it. It was a little tricky. We actually had a visit from the Bond company at one point. They were a little concerned. And at that point, if I had not been the director of photography, I think I would have been fired. Because day 2 in San Diego was unusable the whole day. It was a little creepy.
You've said a bunch of times that your favorite thing about being the DP is you get to do things that somebody else you would have to fire for. Have to fire yourself.
Or certainly it would take a long time to talk them into it. Even, let's say, for instance, this sequence, the Cincinnati stuff where we're not using the 85, I think more often than not, you'd have somebody saying, okay, well, what if we use the 81C, which is sort of a half filter so that it doesn't go this blue. And, luckily I was dealing with Jim Planette, my gaffer, who's worked with some great cinematographers like John Toll and Robert Elswit. And he couldn't, even though he was incredibly experienced, he couldn't have been more adventurous.
He's amazing. Great guy.
Hold it.
This
is fascinating.
Here's a scary scene if you have children.
What I love that Erica Christensen did here and you guys captured, I think, so perfectly is the almost sort of erotic response, just the overwhelming erotic sort of pleasurable response to drugs. Drugs feel good. That's why people do them. And she just gets her socks knocked off. And then the Seth character takes the opportunity when she's somewhat incapacitated.
Well, I know.
I mean,
I remember when we were watching the dailies and Jim was sitting next to me and his wife happened to be visiting and she said, I consider that to be a rape scene. And she's absolutely right.
Yeah, and it sets the hook deep in Erica's character. That one tear rolling down out of her eye from the smoke is amazing.
Yeah, there was a lot of smoke. I think we went a few takes on that, probably a dozen.
Duck. Thank you very much.
Now, this scene's interesting for us anyway, because you've spoken about how Helena's sort of voice came to you at one point and you were talking, suddenly duck salad popped into your head.
Craziest thing. I'd had trouble starting. I'd come see you week after week and just say, oh yeah, things are great, but really I hadn't written a page, and woke up in the middle of the night with a voice in my head just saying, duck salad? You never eat duck salad. Why? I know I don't. But they say there are two kinds of fat now, and one of them's good. Just this sort of Republican country club chatter. And my girlfriend was next to me, and she thought someone was in the house. She got scared, and I said, no, I just heard this thing. And she said, well, why don't you write it down? And the whole thing started to come in a rush, and had a draft about 7 weeks later. But it's very interesting. I had gotten to spend some time sort of with the family of a renegade financier who was sort of hiding out in La Jolla, and he bought a huge house. And I'd met a bunch of people down there, and there's a lot of defense contractor money. It's very conservative, very wealthy, and very insular. And I think it's a strange place.
You're gonna have to promise me no swinging or club in the car. Okay.
Until you officially take over the Office of National Drug Control Policy.
And we go back to Washington. And again, the difficulty in these kinds of scenes is that you have a character who's being spoken to by a lot of people. Luckily, when, Albert Finney's doing the speaking and Michael Douglas is doing the listening, you can get away with a lot. This was actually shot... These interiors were shot in Pasadena, in a building that's now being controlled, if I'm not mistaken, by the Red Cross.
Red Cross building, yeah.
But had these rooms that look like those photographs that we've all seen of offices in the executive building, the old executive building. And we sort of dressed them out. And if I'm not mistaken, all the things that we shot in here we had to do in a day. And Albert had quite a mouthful to go through.
For the next few weeks, if you allow me, I will bring you up to speed on an incredible...
E.W. Moffat, who did a great job, I think, playing Michael Douglas's number 2 right-hand man.
In my research trip, one of my research trips, I was in Washington, and I met a man at the Defense Department, deep in the D-ring of the Pentagon, who this man's loosely based on. Very sharp guy with a couple of graduate degrees, who was responsible for overseeing the Pentagon's efforts in the war on drugs, and he had a just very sophisticated view of how Washington worked and how the war on drugs was working.
A career guy?
Career guy, grad degree from Chicago, grad degree from Georgetown, spends billions of dollars a year.
Yes, sir. I'll be right outside.
See, here's one of those things, like you saw the badge that E.W. Moffat was wearing. I remember having a 10-minute discussion about whether Michael Douglas would be wearing one of those badges or not. Went back and forth. Well, technically he would, and blah, blah, blah. And I finally said, I can't have Michael Douglas, the star of the movie, walking around with this, hello, my name is, thing on his chest.
That was a good decision.
We bailed on that. This story, it's actually a joke that somebody had told me. I remember we were talking about this. I was obsessed with trying to work this in somewhere, this joke that Jeremy Irons had told me in Prague when we were making Kafka.
When Khrushchev was forced out, he sat down, he wrote 2 letters and gave them to his successor. He said, when you get yourself into a situation you can't get out of, open the first letter and you'll be saved.
It has a very sort of Kafka-esque circular logic to it. I guess the reason I was trying to work it in is it seemed to be so much the point of no matter who's sitting in this chair.
It's a perfect foil for all of Michael Douglas's sort of vaulting ambition. He's coming to Washington. He's been a player in the backwater. Out in Ohio, he's a state judge, and now he's got a chance to shine in the big leagues. And, he clearly thinks he's going to do it far better than his predecessor. And his predecessor just looks at him, gets a read on him in 30 seconds, and then just in this elliptical story takes him down to ground zero. It's beautiful.
These first 3 shots were actually in Tijuana. The sequence that's coming up, though, was shot in Nogales.
Don't you want to know what kind of car it is?
Yeah, it's a brown Ford Explorer.
Look, it was right here.
We explored the idea of shooting in Tijuana and were basically told that would not be a good idea, that people were aware of the fact that we were making this film, and that they couldn't really vouch for our safety. And so we ended up looking somewhere else and found this town, Nogales, which is on the border of, is it Arizona? Wait, Sonora. God, no, I'm forgetting.
It was like Around the World in 80 Days.
Yeah. But Nogales turned out to be sort of the perfect place for us to go and shoot all the Javier sequences, and we had a great time there. They were extremely cooperative, and we're shooting on the street here without a lot of control. I mean, often none. And it was pretty loose, and we were able to get what we needed in pretty short order.
One of the cartels in the movie is based on one of the big cartels one of the 2 big cartels in the world, based in Tijuana, very loosely, the Arellano Felix brothers, and the murder raid in Tijuana. I just think that Nogales was an excellent choice.
No, I remember we were shooting on the border in San Diego in April. Since the first of the year, there'd been over 60 homicides in Tijuana, most of which were drug-related. Here we are in Georgetown. This was an ambitious day's work. We had...
What a long day.
Yeah, we'd sent out a lot of letters to people on both sides of this issue, real people like
Bill Weld.
Yeah. And asked them to come and talk to us, really as themselves. And we had 3 cameras running, and we ended up interspersing it with scripted stuff to help create this impression of many voices.
I think it's incredible, because I was actually looking back at this scene, and this was the scene where we were putting forth all of our thoughts about the war on drugs. And we had lobbyists and judges and senators and some of the funniest just sort of one-off lines. And somehow you took the pithy stuff from the script and then got Academy Award performance out of the senator from Utah.
That's not significant to these reporters. They want to see people.
Well, he's coming up, Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch did a 10-minute monologue sort of off the cuff. I mean, none of these were rehearsed. There's Barbara Boxer right there. I mean, I would just bring them in and say, this guy's the new drug czar. Tell him what you think about the current drug policy. Tell him what's going on in your area and how he should navigate Washington. And Orrin Hatch there with Senator Grassley did 10 minutes off the cuff. That was pretty astonishing.
And then he invited us up to the Senate to listen to some of his music compositions for film.
That's right. He writes music. Forgot about that.
Addicts don't vote.
I love this bit here, what Ruiz says, his protestations about how he's a legitimate businessman, because it's how these importers started. They started running the drugs on fishing boats. The first wave in the 60s and early 70s came in on tuna boats.
Hope it's all good, because it's as good as it's going to get for a long, long time, Eduardo.
Look, I'm a legitimate businessman. I've got tuna boats. I'm a fisherman. All right, get out.
Even though it makes it more difficult for our picture editor and sound editors, I tend to like to let people sort of run over each other because it just sounds more natural. As I said, more often than not, we were shooting 2 cameras, so you have a few more options, but I'm always willing to trade technical imperfections for some amount of energy or emotion. And you hate to tell actors like these, oh, you know what, when you get really mad, can you just wait for the other guy to finish before you yell at him? One thing we can mention here as well is the fact that, with the exception of the music, the entire film is in mono. I don't know that many people would consciously notice that while they're watching the film, but Larry Blake, who is my supervising sound editor and re-recording mixer, suggested at a certain point when we were listening to the mix that to play it in sort of normal stereo was actually not consistent with the aesthetic of the film. And he said, I think we should fold everything down to the center channel except the score. And I agreed immediately. I thought that's exactly what's not right. And he folded it all down. And I don't know many mixers. I don't know if they get paid by the channel or not. I don't know many mixers who would suggest that as an option.
I love this, which is this sort of trophy wife, a beautiful young wife in this very fancy neighborhood, and suddenly they're, 50 DEA agents crawling
over her house.
And it's, what will the neighbors think? You've got people peeking over hedges.
No, exactly. We should mention that Catherine was 5 to 6 months pregnant during the filming of Traffic, and had more emotional stability than most of the crew, actually. I was really impressed by her energy and good spirits. I mean, she was just, first of all, she didn't hesitate when she found out she was pregnant and told me, and I said, gee, can I think about that? I remember I called you and I called Laura and Bickford, and we spoke to Ed Zwick and Marshall Herskovitz, and we all sort of decided we need to take advantage of this.
I remember when you called me, the first thing I said was, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't we think of that? It's perfect for a character.
But at the same time, if she weren't really pregnant and people didn't know that she weren't really pregnant, I think it might seem like we're trying to stack the deck.
Sure.
I think we got really lucky, as we did often on this film.
Tú ganas $316 al mes.
We haven't even talked about Benicio del Toro, who I heard gave an award-winning performance. He was thorough, dedicated, smart, and exciting to watch. And it's hard to... I know we had him in mind very, very, very early on. We also, I think, knew in our hearts that these sections of the film were going to be in Spanish. I had neglected, I guess just because I was so busy, to tell USA Films that was going to be the case. And it wasn't until actually they saw an invoice for a dialect coach that I got a call, which had to have been a week before shooting. And we had a brief conversation, and basically I said, look, I think if you want anyone to take this film seriously, these sequences have to be in Spanish. You just can't have guys running around, speaking accented English. It just won't work. And they said, well, can you do both? And I said, I can't do that to the actors. And I know if there's an English version out there somewhere, somebody will use it. And they said, fine. It wasn't a big argument. They just, I think, wanted to hear us explain it.
And I think Benicio, when he went down and did several weeks of work he's Puerto Rican, and he went and studied with a Mexican dialect coach and also worked with Mexican police officers. And his research, I think, brought a lot of credible detail to the storyline.
And I think it also, he and Jacob Vargas, I know, being in scenes together where they were speaking in Spanish sort of created a bond between them that I could never have orchestrated on my own.
I'm good. I just don't understand. I can't believe it.
What's Washington like?
What's Washington like? It's like...
This is actually very interesting. We were talking about the structure of the first third of the film early on. You said to me, withhold the fact that Michael Douglas is Erica Christensen's father, and it'll have the effect of restarting the movie at this point. So we'll have seen her doing the drugs, and it'll be this moment. And that phrase, restarting the movie, really stuck in my head. I thought it was a great idea.
Oh, good. I totally forgot that I said that, but yeah, and it's the problem with those things is it's always hard to tell whether or not that was the effect for the audience or not, whether they saw her and went, oh no. You hope that they do. But Erica, was one of a group of young actresses that we had come in, and I have to say she impressed all of us immediately. I mean, there really wasn't much discussion. She just was extraordinary. And the fact that she was an attractive girl, but not implausibly attractive, sort of worked to her advantage. She looked like, well, she was 17 at the time. She looked like one of those kids.
I really was hoping that it would be I wrote in the script a 16-year-old who really looks 16, which means she looks younger.
Right. Dennis Quaid, my God. In the hopes that we could front load the film with as many movie stars as possible, we approached Dennis about playing Arnie Metzger, this sort of, well, I don't want to say slimy, but he has a little bit of a sheen on him. And luckily, he said yes immediately. And I think, unfortunately, in our desire to get the film down to a manageable length, I feel bad sometimes. I feel like Catherine and Dennis got gutted a little bit because several of their scenes got either trimmed down or cut. They'll appear in the supplementary section, and you can judge for yourself whether we made the right call. But I know late on, I really felt like, they suffered a little because there were some really interesting scenes between the two of them. It was an interesting relationship. One of the scenes that were cut as well was the introductory scene to Frankie Flowers, the assassin, where he's meeting with a sort of black market propeller head.
He's shopping for observation and listening equipment for breaking into cell phones. I loved that speech.
Yeah, it was a nice scene.
This was one of the tricks of the movie, I think, expositionally, was how much information we could leave out to make this vast story fit into something that was workable. And this, I think, works. And we've compacted a sequence. How do you find this man? How do you meet him? How do you capture him? And I think you did it with incredible economy.
Well, that's the trick. I mean, I think, in my experience, every time you make a film, you're sort of reinventing the wheel, and each film teaches you something different, but you have to relearn the lessons again and again. And on this film, to me, it was about transitions. I felt like the whole movie, in a sense, was about transitions. That may seem really obvious because we have three stories that we're cross-cutting between, but I have to tell you that it wasn't until very late that I sensed that was a very important thing to be discussed and thought about. And transitions like that, the cut from Benicio to Frankie Flowers in the back of the car, I mean, those are the kind of things that when they come up, you think, boy, I wish I had 5 more of those sort of visual storytelling cuts to get you from one place to another. They're hard to come by. I think Benicio and Jacob were legitimately bemused by Tomas's howling in that scene.
Woo, woo, woo. Qué chingón.
Now here's a scene coming up. Some kids doing drugs. Another scene that I think makes parents nervous. And I'm a parent. It certainly makes me nervous. That I think a lot of people assumed was improvised, but actually was very, very, very closely scripted.
This was one of those scenes that I sat down and I wrote it in basically one pass, just came out in a lump, and it stayed pretty together from that first run. I love that we get to see the children of the upper middle class doing this. It's unusual. They're not criminals. They're all planning on going to good colleges. I think beneath it, what is interesting is it's that fueled up Coke talk that, certain people may have heard at various times in their life. And beneath it's that sort of young desire to change the world, So
right. It's this weird juxtaposition, yeah.
There's this well-meaning desire for connection, and yet it's happening in this absurd drug-fueled haze.
And it's also, again, you have to give credit to this group of actors. It's tricky stuff to do. I mean, these, that's not vodka, and they're snorting lactose or whatever it is. Actually, Corey Spears, who plays a fucked up Bowman, made himself physically sick because he was snorting so much of it. And it's not, I wouldn't recommend even snorting lactose. And, you know, again, it's a tricky thing. You don't want to seem too, because people who are screwed up like that don't think they're screwed up. And it's a careful balance that you have to find. And I thought Corey in particular, this scene just gives me the creeps when he starts to lose it. You know, it's a very bad sensation.
I'm so fucking high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, wait.
And unfortunately, poor Stephen Marioni, the editor. I mean, I shot miles of this stuff, 2 cameras going all the time, take after take, and basically dumped it in his lap. And he managed to find a shape for it.
So you're like, why don't we do something? Why don't you do something, Vanessa?
Well, that's what I'm saying, Seth, is you do it.
I'd known of somebody whose last name started with a B, and his nickname, because this sort of happened, and people would always sort of say the line was, you know, fucked up Bowman's turning blue, and it became one of those lines and stuck in my head and recycled it here.
Blue, he's breathing.
Oh my god, fucked up Bowman. Fuck off.
Wait.
This was all, again, we shot, we were shooting in a house in Ohio, and basically Jim Planette and I came in and we sort of lit it up in a way that allowed us to shoot in as many different directions as possible simultaneously, and shot it all in, I think, end to end, 4 or 5 hours. It didn't take that long to actually shoot it all because the kids were so good. I think most people have either, I don't know, this is a classic teenage move to me, trying to drop the guy off at the emergency room and getting back into the car. I mean, I never did that, but I always stayed to make sure he got in.
You were a very heartful person.
Very sensitive.
Okay, nobody has anything on them, right?
Most incredible location. What is this, an abandoned abattoir or something?
No, it was this is outside of El Paso. All these sequences out theoretically, you know, out in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, we walked in, it looked just like this. It was quite a find. A sequence like this is always kind of difficult to shoot, and rehearsal becomes a very important part of it. And you need to make sure that everyone's comfortable. Clifton Collins Jr., who plays Frankie Flowers, basically is strapped naked to a chair and is really strapped naked to a chair. And obviously I was trying to be sensitive to his plight. I think it's impossible to be comfortable shooting a sequence like that, and I tend to want to get through them as quickly as possible. I'm sure I didn't do more than 1 or 2 takes of any of those angles. What he's doing there, for people who maybe aren't clear, is apparently a common form of torture in those situations is to take chili powder and mix it up in carbonated water and spray it up somebody's nose, and you can die from it. I mean, it's supposedly like having a volcano go off in your sinuses, and you can very easily die from it. It's not a cool thing. One of the other difficulties was, obviously, we were dealing with a piece of source material, which was a terrific 6-hour miniseries that ran in the UK. And first of all, how to compress it. And then in the case of the Mexico storyline, we were creating, you know, that from scratch because it was
Pakistan,
Germany, and then sometimes London. And I think that was, I don't know, it was hard. We ended up with a first draft that was long, but sort of purposefully long. And I remember saying, I think it's just going to be long, and why don't we kind of shoot it and we'll sort it out later. I remember having conversations with USA Films where they suggested maybe that there were cuts that we could make. And I said, look, it was a 54-day schedule. I said, if I cut 10 pages out, I'm telling you, I'm not going to shorten the schedule that much. So why don't you just let me shoot everything that we have, and we'll sort it out in the editing room. And they agreed. But it's like all the research you'd done, every tributary led to something interesting, I thought.
It was a strange situation where I'd been doing research for this movie on a parallel line long before we met, and I had all these stories and things worked out. And I think when we put it together with this underlying material, we ended up having the best of a couple of worlds.
Well, as you said, when you were working with Ed on your drug movie before we met, I guess it had been envisioned there would be a single protagonist. And when you and Laura Bickford and I met, and we mentioned this show that had these 3 storylines, that little light went off.
Oh, it changed. I couldn't believe it. I'd done work in television, and yet it never occurred to me. On TV, you work with an ABC story, and I'd done that on NYPD Blue, The Practice. It never occurred to me to do that here. So I was trying to contort this man and get him through Colombia, Mexico, some suburban area, Washington, D.C. with one guy. It was impossible.
Right.
It was driving me mad. And so when you came and said, hey, let's
3
use multiple
stories.
protagonists, it just, I was like, thank you, Stephen. Oh, thank you.
This is Viola Davis, who actually worked with me on Out of Sight, a terrific actress who won the Tony this year. And it's so critical in scenes like this, which are supposed to play as realistically as possible, to get an actor who understands what that means.
This is interesting to me because this exact thing happened to me. This is a transcription of a scene that happened to me when I was in high school, when I was arrested, and I had the same discussion with a social worker, and I ticked off my private school resume.
I'm a National Merit finalist. I'm on the high Q team and the math team. I'm in the Spanish club.
And she looked at me like, what on earth is wrong with you? What are you doing here? Just the withering disgust you never forget.
Well, I guess that was part of the point we were trying to make, which is it's sort of, it hits everywhere. It hits everyone. And Caroline, as we envisioned her, is someone who she's not having trouble at home. Her parents are basically decent parents. There's nothing that they're doing wrong, really. They try to be understanding. It's just, there's no other motivation in her case other than sort of curiosity. And she turns out to be someone who cannot do it casually. I mean, just has a problem.
We had that scene where Seth, I don't think it made it in the movie, where Michael Douglas talks to him. He says, some people can stop. I do it on the weekends and I stop on Monday. And she doesn't stop.
Right. And Michael Douglas his character had a very interesting answer to that. I think that we have that scene in the deleted section.
He's also like the only one that was doing anything about the situation. He definitely had a few beers, but it's not like he wanted to drive.
Great job of lying here. Sort of, again, a tricky thing to be lying on screen. We know she's lying, but to sort of sell it in just the right way. And then I think my favorite thing in this, it was coming out where she leaves and they immediately...
She's lying.
Yeah.
I think she's lying.
I do.
Again, basically walking into a house here and replacing bulbs and lamps with 250 watt bulbs instead of 100 watt bulbs and starting to shoot. This is a scene that would have taken a couple hours to knock out at most, just doing a couple of takes, which just helps keep the actors fresh. I remember when I was shooting Kafka, I was talking to Armin Mueller-Stahl, who had worked with Fassbinder, who was notorious for just doing a single take. And he said, you just learned to be ready. That if you weren't there on the first take, you knew you were going to get shown up. And I find that the actors do fall into that rhythm. And when I met with Michael Douglas early on to talk to him about being in the film, I said, you'll spend more of your day actually acting than any movie you've been on, I guarantee you. And it literally got to the point where he would stop going to his trailer because he'd get halfway there.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody would tap him on the shoulder and say, we're ready.
Yeah, you'd rolled in here. I remember watching the set dressers changing photographs on the shelves, and things are happening all at once here, and suddenly they're shooting.
Again, here's an example of a transition. The scene continues on a little further, but you know that it will. And it seemed like, when Mirioni and I were going back through the film, that realizing that getting out of the scene sort of at its peak and letting the audience fill in the conversation that they know is going to take place after that reaction kept the sense of the stories being active alive. And again, that only comes through sort of trial and error. That was I think it was one of William Goldman's things. He said, get into the scene as late as possible and get out as soon as you can.
Particularly when you're working with a 165-page script or whatever it was we were starting with. I mean, I remember distinctly you saying, well, perhaps this will be like, we'll go for something big, maybe play the E word, an epic. We'll just make it big.
No, why not? I think the thing that concerned me the most was, in the draft, at least that we shot, there were 135 speaking parts, and my fear was that people would get numb after a while. It's just this sort of endless onslaught of characters. But I think through a combination of your ability to voice each of the characters differently, a great job of casting by Deborah Zane, and sort of judicious editing, we were able to, kind of find that balance where people are introduced when you feel like they should be introduced. But it's tricky.
I love Louise Frogley's costumes. I think she just, in such a simple way, in an elegant way, it doesn't catch your eye. She put people in clothes that just help identify them and help keep the storyline straight. I love some of Benizio's just t-shirts and the way he looks.
Right.
So specific.
Peter Riegert, who plays Stephen Bauer's lawyer here, has a scene that was cut at the Georgetown cocktail party, which I think will be in the supplementary section. And again, this is a situation where you have a character who comes in who's sort of pivotal and needs to come across, and you need to find someone who will sort of pop and yet not pop in a way that throws you out of the film. We were trying to, obviously we're mixing movie stars here with lesser known people. And what was, gratifying was to see how quickly the people like Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones and Dennis Quaid sort of fell into the aesthetic of the movie, the style of performance. They just seemed to intuitively understand that there was a certain tone that we were after and a certain pitch to their performance that needed to be maintained in order for everything to be consistent. And they just sort of fell into that. And we were lucky to get, this is John Slattery, who's a terrific actor who came in for 2 hours, to do this part.
It's so potent what he does here. It's so simple. Let's hope it stays that way.
Yeah.
Just takes Michael Douglas down.
Professional help?
No way. My daughter is one of the leading students in her school.
Well, I hope it stays that way.
You can't underestimate the importance of that, because you have one weak link and the whole thing starts to unwind. And that was another thing I was really worried about. But when you're making a movie like this, that you're shooting very much out of sequence, in which you have a lot of speaking parts in a lot of different locations, the fear you have is that tonally you may have drifted. And all you need to do is drift 2 or 3 degrees over the course of a week, and you get 2/3 of the way through a movie, and you've got people behaving like they're in another film. And that was what kept me up nights more than anything. And it wasn't really until several weeks into editing that I felt we'd been very fortunate, that all the actors were in the same movie.
I love this sort of in her private world here. She's reading a fashion magazine before school. She's smoking homemade crack cocaine, basically, at 6:45 in the morning or whatever it's supposed to be, and then she's in the shower exhaling the smoke,
getting ready for class,
getting ready for another day of being an honor student.
This is actually I think it's the only set we built, and it doubled as this room and a room that we'll see later when we redressed it. It was, I think it was the only set built for Traffic. There were a couple of reasons we didn't build sets. The most important, which was financial. We couldn't really afford it. But also, I felt like we should be shooting on location as much as possible, and that the difficulties that presents and the way that it makes you shoot would be consistent with the way a documentary would be shot, and that we should go with that. If you couldn't get the camera where you wanted, then that was just tough.
I think anytime walls are flying, you feel it, even if logically it works. You feel the fact that there's something screwy's going on.
Yeah, I agree. And for some movies, that's fine. For this one, it seemed inappropriate.
You guys remind me of those Japanese soldiers left behind on deserted islands who think World War II is still going on. You know that? Let me be the first to tell you, your government surrendered this war a long fucking time ago.
I don't know. I don't think all
this is the beginning of where Ruiz starts, he accuses them of being a cargo cult, that they think World War II is still going on. He very quickly voices a sort of rational view. You don't expect to hear it coming from a criminal.
No, he's not entirely wrong. He's just not a good guy.
Love his performance. It's a tricky thing to pull off.
And we also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that there was some restructuring done in this section of the film. I think that scene used to come later. I remember coming into the editing room one day and talking to Stephen Marioni and sort of expressing to him that the middle section of the film to me was feeling odd, that I felt like we'd been fairly successful in getting the setup going. And he said, well, I think it's because the scene with Helena where she visits Carl is too late in the middle part of the film. Actually, if we took her scene with Carl, moved it forward and made it one of the first scenes after he's been arrested, that it will color all the other scenes with her that follow, and that the middle section of the film will feel like it has more momentum. So I said, sounds like a good idea to me. He sort of took Helena's story, moved that one scene up and rippled the rest of them back, and suddenly the middle part of the film was feeling a little better. And if you'd asked me if I thought the middle section of the film wasn't working because of some structural issue in Helena's story, I would have said, no, I don't think so. I just knew something was sort of not quite right, and he identified it, I think, pretty clearly.
I love this part here. Sorry to interject, but I love that you and I, one time after one of our meetings at the Daily Grill, we went into Good Guys and looked at CD burners, and we both were about to buy them, and then you backed out, and I bought it and felt incredibly guilty about spending the money.
Oh, that's right.
And so I wrote in here that he, the assassin has a, he's materialistic and he loves his stereos.
Oh, well, see, then that CD burner's a write-off. Something came out of it. Clifton Collins here at the beginning of the scene, which I took off. Salazar makes him drink a glass of wine, and then in the scene as it continues, Clifton pours another glass for himself. Well, I did a few takes of this scene, and even though that's cranberry juice, Clifton was on the verge of being very sick. I think it was almost 20 glasses of cranberry juice he drank in the course of 90 minutes. Don't do that at home. Now, a sequence like this, certainly I would be thinking of a couple of films. The most famous would be Battle of Algiers, which is, I think, one of the best things anybody's ever done, and has such a convincing sense of reality to it. I literally had that film with me while we were shooting Traffic and would watch it a lot. Z was another film that I would check out occasionally, and French Connection and Sorcerer I also used to watch a lot because I thought Friedkin in those two films had a great sort of verite aesthetic going that was energetic and yet felt very reality based. And we added this text, I think, later on because we felt, again, there was some more information that we could put across, and we wanted people to understand the context of these particular activities.
We're dealing with this incredible situation that's actually true, which is everybody's listening on everybody else. Everybody's working for one or other of the cartels. The law enforcement in Mexico breaks down into sort of which team you're on, which cartel's paying your bills, and people hang around the police station, fixers who represent the cartels, and they just sort of looking out for everybody's interest. And that line in Mexico, law enforcement's an entrepreneurial activity is, I think, was borne out by almost all of our research.
Well, I remember us going down to Tijuana, and we talked to a cop who, in many ways, was not unlike Benicio's character. He was basically a good cop, and he said, I know where the line is. I know what I can do. I know what I'm not allowed to do. And I get left alone. But, I've seen a lot of people go down. And, we need to make clear when we talk about this stuff that you're talking about economic forces here of tidal wave strength. I mean, you've got a country that's always is in a difficult economic situation, and the amount of money that we're talking about is huge. And guys like Javi are making, not a lot of money. And when somebody confronts you with not only the possibility of making some money, but the very real possibility that if you're not on their side, that you may not be around.
It's gold or lead. I mean, that's what the police officer said to us in that day in Tijuana. It was fascinating. It was searing.
This is a scene that we reshot after the first preview. I think we felt that we needed to see the facade break a little bit. And so we recycled the set from the interrogation room, just like a Roger Corman movie, and hauled Catherine and Stephen back in and did this again. To me, this is not unusual. I've reshot or added things on literally every movie I've ever directed, including Sex Lies. It's just, for me, become part of the process, which is sort of looking at the film, screening it, and trying to fix things. But I'm really glad we went back and did this again. I think she needed that moment. The scene in its original incarnation was more, she just wasn't as upset.
And what we needed was she was starting to seem a little bit unsympathetic. And this is a mama bear who's protecting her brood. And we needed to see these kind of volcanic forces underneath. She's barely holding it together. She's a woman who is in this society where everyone's watching you. She throws fundraisers. She's part of this sort of power circuit. She's married into it. It's not where she's come from. And she's just trying to keep it together. And it's really hard. And so now she's sitting near her husband and she cries. And it's beautiful.
Spastic Jack.
There's
Straight to the top. That was a good title that you came up with.
And that's our made-up toy, our cartoon character who has all his own adventures. And I remember getting it translated into Spanish as El Espastico Jacopo. And, of course, at the end, that's the toy the kids are playing with, and it's constructed from cocaine.
Yeah, I think I cut that shot out.
Theoretically, there would have been a doll constructed from cocaine at the end of the movie.
We have the infamous warehouse scene where she sees how the dolls are made into cocaine, but that didn't make it. Here we are, on location here Cincinnati. And one of the things that I thought was chilling about this kind of scene was how matter-of-fact it was. How matter-of-fact it is for these characters. There's something so workaday about it.
I think that there's something really interesting here, which is that you've got the kids from the suburbs who are going downtown to essentially have adventure. You know, it's fueled by desire to get drugs, but it's breaking out of, it's these two very different, Indian Hills outside of Cincinnati, in this area downtown where there were race riots. Less than a year later, the city was rioting there. And you stand on these corners where the people are scoring drugs, and you look at the faces of who's buying the drugs. And it'll be a SUV, a Ford Explorer after Ford Explorer after Ford Explorer with, white people from the suburbs coming into the inner city to get drugs. And it's a very interesting economy.
Well, and that's where that speech came about that you wrote that we'll see later, in which Seth sort of articulates his market forces theories, which are absolutely right. As much as you hate his character at that moment, I know that you and I talked about the fact that we can't design the movie this way. These kids go down there and the drug dealer's black and have that sort of thing that you see a lot without Seth sort of describing why this works the way it works today.
And it's in those kids in the hotel room. It's like this desire to escape their lives. I wish we could just stay here forever. It's so perfect, and yet they have these lives back at home that are, ostensibly pretty decent.
I would think so.
It's just, they don't want to be there.
Now we're looking at what I have to say, for me, is the worst directed sequence in the film. I just remember this day being out in this little inlet, shooting this sequence, and really having no idea how to go about it. And I tried a couple of different things, none of which worked. And Catherine, bless her soul, sort of running up and down the beach all day. And there are days when you just don't have it. And I felt like this day I didn't have it. And it was frustrating because I felt there was a wonderful sort of, Hitchcockian moment there where she's looking at the kid and then the kid's not there. And I totally missed it. I missed it completely. This is,
love that she's reading Valley of the Dolls, the undercover agent.
Yeah, well, that was, I couldn't help that. But to this day, this whole sequence I look at and feel like I just was asleep at the wheel. So what can I say?
This is one of these moments that comes out of the underlying material. I mean, it comes out of Traffic with a K. A lot of the plot points, the turns in Catherine Zeta-Jones' story, the Helena Ayala story comes from the miniseries, and I think you did a great job of shooting that, and I like it. And I like the way, but sometimes it feels, from a story perspective, sometimes it just feels a little neat. Things on that storyline lurch, and they just accelerate in a way that I think that the other storylines don't. I think that that's part of the problem you're dealing with in a couple of these moments. That one, in the moment with the assassin,
right,
taking out the Frankie Flowers, and I don't know. We
tried
ourselves crazy over them.
No, I know. Well, like I said, I think she in the editing, her storyline sort of took a beating a little bit because the shifts were more gradual. And I ended up pulling a lot of that stuff, and it's a trade-off. It's Lem Dobbs and I've had this argument many, many times, and I often end up being in a situation where my producers are trying to convince me to restore material because I'm very sensitive to length. I mean, that's the one refrain you hear from most people who go to movies, which is, it was too long. It was just too long. So I tend to want to accelerate things, but I have to be careful because sometimes I damage the characters.
Yeah, or you end up with like a Mexican radio kind of. But I don't think that happened there.
Benicio, here we are in Nogales, was eating these tacos from this taco stand, and I was absolutely convinced, of course, that he was going to become sick, because quite a few crew members went down while we were in Nogales, and just not a problem. He not only ate them during this take, but he would wander off, when he wasn't shooting, to sort of soak up some atmosphere, and would eat lunch from vendors off the street. Never had a problem.
It's interesting. The DEA isn't supposed to operate. The Americans aren't supposed to really be operating in Mexico, recruiting officers or recruiting people or informants. It's really supposed to be, separate. And of course it isn't.
John, how are you?
We're at the actual El Paso Intelligence Center in El Paso, and to my knowledge, we were the first film crew allowed in, I don't think this area where we are now, but in the area that's coming up, which is this nerve center. I don't think anybody had been allowed in prior to us shooting in there.
Talking with the beard is Craig Chrétien, who was the head of all the international forces of the DEA, and he's retired now.
I have to say, the government agencies that we dealt with on this film were remarkably open and gave us unprecedented access, and never tried to influence the content of the film, and basically took the attitude that, look, you're going to go and make the movie. We know that. We'd rather have it be accurate than have it necessarily reflect our viewpoint. And all the people you see in this scene, that's the head of Epic there speaking. These are all government people.
They're looking over, and I remember the guy's name, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies,
who supposedly died during plastic surgery. And that was a story we sort of borrowed and expanded upon.
Nobody.
We filled out a lot of the the entourage here with crew members, even when it was, even when they didn't necessarily look right. It was just part of the cost-cutting methods that we were employing. That are on the right of Michael Douglas. There is Bosty, one of our ADs. Eric Wyckoff, one of our electricians, was sitting next to him. And the reason this was so cost-effective was this entourage had to travel all over the place during the shoot, and to have to fly extras in, all over. There's Phil Messina, there's Robin Lechenou. This is all crew members here. So we saved a lot of money.
This was an interesting scene. I remember in one of you were working through many of the versions and screening it. You had cut this scene at one point, took a couple of these out, and you ended up restoring it, and I was really glad.
Yeah,
went too deep.
Yeah, I did. There was a version of the film that we gutted everybody, and it became apparent very quickly that we'd hurt ourselves. So this was a scene that was put back, and in retrospect, it's a pretty crucial character scene. But this is how paranoid you get, when people keep telling, the first thing they ask when you say, "Hey, will you come see the film? We're screening it, and I need some guinea pigs." They go, "How long is it?"
Yep.
And you say, 2 hours and
one of the only scenes where treatment is mentioned, it's sort of the political solutions are really discussed. And
this scene and these scenes in Arnie's office took place very early in the San Diego shoot, and it was during a period where I was still experimenting, shall we say, with this flashing idea, struggling, others might call it.
Somebody, I think it was the Obregons, threatened David. They want a first payment.
Just to digress for a minute, the tricky thing about flashing is that
I'd give it to you myself.
What you see through the lens isn't really representative of what the film is going to look like. And so you end up sort of flying on instruments. And right in the middle, there were 3 or 4 days we were in this office, and right in the middle of it, some stuff had come back and it wasn't good. And then we continued to shoot. And of course, at the end of every day, the decision of whether to write flash 10% on the camera reports would come up. And we'd had a very good day. We'd shot a lot of footage. And I remember standing there with my gaffer, Jim Planette, and him saying, well, what do you want to do? Because we'd just gotten word that some other stuff from the previous day, which we hadn't seen yet, but had heard from the lab, might not be good. He said, what do you want to do? Do you want to flash it or not? And I said, yeah, go ahead and flash it. And we flashed it, and it was fine. But, in retrospect, now you look back on it, you go, oh, well, so you go back and reshoot it. But on the day, and now, having directed yourself, the idea of having to go back and do anything again is just excruciating.
I think it's amazing that you shot this movie in 54 days, now having some idea of what a schedule means. I mean, I remember being there and hearing the script supervisor, Annie Wells, who's awesome, saying, he did 50 setups today. I remember thinking, 50 setups, that's interesting.
And 10 of them were good.
50 is like 3 movie days.
Mexico City. We went down to Mexico City and had according to the people who were helping us there, it had just rained and we had the clearest day in 4 years, because normally you can't see a quarter of a mile because of the smog. So we got very, very lucky. We also got very lucky that Salma Hayek came in and did us a favor, basically for a day, and looks as beautiful here, I think, as she's ever looked. And she's an attractive lady. I think she was excited about coming in and doing a scene in Spanish, actually. We're cheating a bit, though. The first 2 shots were in Mexico City. We're now shooting on some winding roads up in La Jolla. But that's part of the fun of filmmaking, is cheating, actually.
I had so much fun writing the relationship between this sort of high-end, kept woman and Benicia's character. Just keeps looking at her in the rearview mirror. She prattles on about
what a great life she has.
What a great life she has.
Yeah. Now we're about to meet a character who, again, we're sort of basing on the person that was Amado Carrillo Fuentes, who died during plastic surgery. Our trick is that he hasn't, in fact, died and is still alive, controlling the drug trade through Salazar. This was something that we had to keep adjusting a little bit. I remember we added one line for Jacob in the car here. It was a concept that people really were having trouble sort of understanding.
Well, it's very confusing. I mean, we're basically saying that not just a part of the law enforcement infrastructure works for a cartel. We're saying the entire law enforcement infrastructure for prosecuting the drug laws in Mexico really
works for a cartel, but not the one that operates in their territory.
Right, works for the other cartel.
Yeah,
who's trying to break in. It's a turf war.
Yeah.
I remember being completely baffled by it. I mean, I had it clear in my head, then I would forget again. I'd have it clear. You'd call me up and say, "What was it again?" Oh my gosh, it's like a Rubik's cube.
I just remember my strongest memory of this scene is how hard Benicio would hit the brakes. There were 3 people other than the actors in the car, myself operating the camera, Barry Idaman, the first assistant, and Paul Ledford, the sound mixer, in the very back. And Benicio would hit the brakes so hard that I thought we were all just going to fly out of the doors or over the seats. But I, didn't have it in me to tell him to ease up. This is a great scene for the married couples out there.
This is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. I love everything that's not said and that just frigid chill that's in the car with them. This was a scene you and I worked on, and I
remember being in. It was one of our. I think we did 3 sessions, right, where we locked ourselves in a hotel. Was it 2? Because I thought we did 2 at the Beverly Hills Hotel and then 1 at the other place. It was 2?
2, but I remember someone had given us a suggestion that it was a there was a place here for a scene between the couple, and we hadn't ever done that. It wasn't something it fit into the movie, and it was a great idea. And it was one of those scenes where it just, in, a minute and a half, we had it.
Also, I shot a lot of coverage for this scene and decided to just go with this single angle, mostly because I felt it was kind of her scene, and tilting it in her direction was the best thing for the movie at this point, because he's about to have his own scene coming up. Amy Irving was someone who was discussed very early on, and there wasn't really anybody else that we considered. I just have always liked her and thought she would be terrific, and was absolutely convincing in my mind as Erica's mother. So that was an easy one. Here's a shot that normally you would cut out, these shots of him sort of coming in the house, but there's something. There's something about the guy coming up the stairs alone.
I think it grounds it in a suburban reality in some way.
Yeah, I didn't have any rational reason for keeping it other than it was. I don't know. Those shots were, to me, evocative. It reminded me of my father, or I don't know. Now this scene we should talk about. There's lots to talk about here. Tell me about writing this scene.
Well, this was based on, unfortunately, some experience, some research I was doing over the course of about 20 years. And I'd spent a lot of time in bathrooms. And when I was writing this, I had to go back into a place, at least, they say, was dredging up some stuff that wasn't that pleasant. In fact, I remember at one point falling out of my chair, just, kind of shaking and really feeling terrible. And I in the script, I wrote a page and a half, I think, of description of the inside of this bathroom. It's like the most exhaustively described bathroom probably in the history of movie. And it's that sense of, you're locked away, and, it's the only, and often in houses like this is the only door that locks. And she's closeted herself in there. And
where are they? Where the hell are they?
Look at Erica just tracking her deterioration.
Fuck you.
And I can't imagine when you're a parent, the first time one of your kids looks at you and says, fuck you, it's got to be, it's a seismic event.
She's got all these little bits of druggy paraphernalia, and it's perfectly done. There's all this charred aluminum foil and little glass pipes, and she's got, stuff for all sorts of different types of drugs up there. Let me just say there's a chilling reality to it.
This is shot all available light. We did the whole thing in 2 hours, 2 cameras running all the time. And I think it helped Michael and Erica to sort of stay in it. I mean, literally, they just stand right there and say, okay, we got that. And I would move over 4 feet, and Gary J on the B camera would move, 4 feet in the other direction. I go, here we go. And that was that.
And the other people wedged in the corner of the room, sort of ducking flying drug paraphernalia.
Yeah, exactly. Props flying in and out. We should talk about the evolution of Javier, who, when we first started talking about the movie, was a very manipulative guy who was sort of playing everybody against each other and was in love with his partner's wife. And through a combination of research and discussions with Benicio and our own sense of, well, what's the arc of that? We sort of ended up, here, which is, I think, a much more interesting place. A guy who, at the head of the film, might have been content to sort of stay where he is.
I had written a kind of one-off speech that sat in the middle of the movie where he talked about baseball in parks, which is now takes place in a swimming pool. And I'd written this speech where he said, they said, what do you want? He says, I want to see casinos along the Tijuana River. I want to see roads connecting the ocean to the city. I want to see all these different things. And it was very interesting. That speech came out of a sense I'd gotten from Tim Golden, our consultant, who was a writer for the New York Times who'd covered the drug war for many years. It was something he didn't say, but something he felt very deeply, having been in Tijuana for 10 or 15 years, which he'd felt this place falling apart. And he felt it personally, deeply. It really made him angry. It wasn't what he was talking about specifically, but his general sense of despair over the rise in street crime, the rise in prostitution, the rise in crack dealers along the border with Mexico. And as Tim would talk about it, he'd be saying one thing, and what I'd be seeing in him was just this feeling. So I'd written that sort of speech, like, people love baseball. Everybody loves parks. Everybody loves baseball. And it sort of sat there. And I think you came along, looked at it. I think Benicio looked at it. And I think you guys, I don't know, something got rolling. And that sort of became a much larger metaphor as we worked on it and worked through this storyline. And away went the sort of crafty, Mexican sort of villain. And in came something that just is, I think, 50 times better.
Yeah, I think so too. And certainly, in Benicio, you have to take advantage of his inner life as an actor. He's just so good at playing a guy who's trying to be close to the vest, but you see all the wheels turning. You know that actually he's very emotional and that he's really struggling. Now his arc, for lack of a better term, I think is much more complex than when we started. I mean, the guy was just going basically in one direction.
Now, that scene in the swimming pool, probably of all the things people ask me when they ask me anything about the film, I mean, the number one question is, who thought up the idea of putting that scene in the swimming pool? And I'm faced every time with the choice of taking credit for it or telling the truth. And I don't know if you were Benicio about that idea, but it's the one thing people ask.
Oh, really?
Failingly.
Oh, that's funny. I think that was Benicio when I was talking to him, and we were talking about the scene that used to exist. They took him to a warehouse or something, and
had the conversation sort of as it plays. But
yeah.
It was
the exact conversation. And his point, which was well taken, was I would be too flipped out to be taken somewhere like that. I would be really scared. And basically I said, well, where would you want to go? Where would you feel safe? And he said, a swimming pool. It's a great cut, I'll buy it. But that was a sequence that I unfortunately had to don a wetsuit for. I'm not a real water person. I don't mind being in the water, but I have a problem when there's something not under my feet. Fortunately, we were in sort of the kiddie end of the pool, which was shallow and warm, of course. And I'm embarrassed to say pictures circulated.
I remember trying to get you to come down to the beach when I was working one time and bring your daughter. I said I thought she'd like the ocean. And you said kids don't like the ocean.
I was projecting. I should mention at this point, this sequence, the lemonade sequence, I shot several times, partially because I screwed up the first time. The second time, we didn't have sun, and I thought it was important that we have sun as much as possible in the San Diego La Jolla sequences. And it began to be a running gag, maybe not a very funny one for Don and Louis, because I would carry the van to every location, because I don't think there's a single van sequence that I didn't reshoot at least once. Again, mostly for lighting purposes, the fucking DP. And it turned out in this case that the last time we did it was also the best time we did it. We had the light exactly the way we wanted. And I felt really lucky that I had actors who were able to hide their, what would be the word, frustration at my wanting to do it again and again.
I've got to give a nod to my mother in that last scene. Betty Jane Haig of Louisville, Kentucky. This is, I thought this is exactly what my mother would do. The police were
if she had police outside.
The police were watching her. She would take them lemonade.
And that my life had become unmanageable. See, my disease tells me
this monologue I always liked a lot.
I love the way you shot this. You put the camera in the center of the room. I mean, just with you and maybe just you, and you sat on an apple box and spun around, and you get to read all these faces of the people.
It was one of those days where I remember it took me a while to decide how we should do it, because
recovering alcoholic.
Again, it's you sit there when the ideas aren't coming, and they really weren't coming that morning. You go back to, what is this about? What is the scene about? What is the scene about? And the scene obviously is about her discomfort. And finally I decide, and not only her discomfort at being there, but her discomfort with being in this room full of people who she doesn't know, who she doesn't relate to, and she's expected to open up. And that's when I thought, okay, if that's what it's about, how do you portray that? And that's when I thought you do it by showing everyone else first and then landing on her and going, oh God, what is she doing here?
Everything in her life's designed to convince her she's special. She's a national mayor. This, everything is rarefied. And now she's in circumstances where she has to relate to the guy eating out of the dumpster and this person over there. And it was just, showing them all. And it was also very early. So on the idea front, I remember it was 5:30 in the morning when you got out there. It was early. It's some empty YMCA camp or something in the middle of Ohio. She's just shut down. She can't relate to these people. And Erica's performance is astonishing.
Yeah, that look on her face at the end, certainly familiar to anyone who's spent time in a high school. This was a sequence that sort of I actually tinkered with right up until we finished. I kept adding shots of these little nonlinear flashbacks, Helena kind of running through the sequence of events in her mind, which is a huge cheat because we don't do it anywhere else in the film. But I felt we needed it. And I remember it was really, really late. We'd basically finished the movie, and I called Mirioni up and I said, I've got to go back into this reel. It's really bugging me. I'd been to press screenings. I mean, it was done. And we stuck in a couple of more shots of her with Stephen Bauer, watching him get in the car, watching her with him on the couch. And I know they're tiny, but again, I felt like I needed to try and help her because I'd gutted her so much in the editing.
This is one of just the sort of classic tricks of exposition. I remember we talked about this stuff at length, but let's just put it all on microfilm.
Yeah, right. Well, it's I can't remember. I know in the original series there's an envelope or something. I don't know if it was, I can't remember if it was microfilm or whatever. Yeah, it's one of those situations where you go, okay, well, did the FBI bring in one of those ultraviolet things? Did they look? And you just say, I don't know. We've got to get going here. And I just like the idea of her up late at night by herself, like cutting open a painting. It just seemed like a neat thing.
I got home one night and on my front porch was that painting wrapped up in brown paper. Phil Messina and his wife had dropped it off. I was so happy.
We have some Mexico City helicopter footage here. We had an amazing helicopter pilot who did this shot, which you are not allowed to do. I said, I want to fly over, where the presidential palace is. And somebody immediately said, you're not allowed to do that. That's illegal. And the helicopter guy just sort of looked at me and said, and it was translated for me, I think I know what you want, and flew straight at it and over it.
How did you do this shot? This is incredible to me. You landed a helicopter. Wasn't this in downtown Los Angeles? Maybe?
Yes, this is why I've had a couple of people say, wow, I like the upside down helicopter shot. The reason it's upside down is because when it was right side up, it was so obvious that we were in downtown LA that I literally turned to the first assistant cameraman and I said, turn it up, put it on its back because this just looks bogus. And then I can't operate wheels like a geared head. So Gary J., the second operator, who's terrific, had to operate that shot. And we did one take and the helicopter just landed on the lens. And I said, Gary, try and follow it. Keep trying to follow it. And he followed it and ended up in that upside down nose, perfect composition. And I said, that's it. Don't even try another one. But it was born out of trying to sort of cheat a little bit. Again, here we're sort of riffing on the Rebollo story as it actually happened, which is, here was a guy that would be flown up to Washington on a regular basis to be briefed on the status of
we were thrilled.
The drug war.
Barry McCaffrey was thrilled. He'd found a counterpart, a real can-do guy in Mexico. And then it turned out that he was working for one of the cartels, and they were a little concerned about that.
This interior is not Mexico City. This is a bank in downtown LA, which has been used in so many films. It's almost embarrassing to admit. And Phil Messina, the production designer, I hope won't be listening to this commentary. But again, necessity. And the trick is to sort of dress it and light it in a way that hopefully makes it not easily recognizable. I remember this was one of the days when, from a lighting standpoint, I was having a bit of difficulty. I started with one idea, spent a couple hours on it, and then tore it apart. I mean, this whole thing of shooting on my own, came about mostly from a desire to be sort of more intimate with the film itself, and especially the actors, and also to keep the momentum going, because I'm not as particular as a proper cinematographer. I don't have to worry whether somebody likes how it looks or not. I'm not going to be hired by somebody else. So it's something that I'm willing to trade my lack of certain skills for the momentum.
If you're ever looking, if I ever get a chance to make another movie and you're interested,
I'd shoot for you in a heartbeat. I'd like to do that, actually, shoot for somebody else. I think it'd be fun.
It's good work, and you have a long career that way.
These scenes I really enjoy a lot, just the dynamic between all of these characters. This hotel in downtown San Diego was a great find, I think. I mean, we didn't have to do a lot to it. And again, we're shooting almost, just available light here, walking in and turning the cameras on. Again, when I watch a sequence like this, I think of Deborah Zane, our casting director. These are small but really important roles that people need to come across the right way.
I should say this dialogue, is one of the things I remembered distinctly from the miniseries written by Simon Moore, and I thought these were so pithy and perfect.
The office with a desk and a telephone. I never sold anything the whole time I was there. Sometimes people came in and they got paid. I don't really know what they did.
This woman in 4 sentences delivers the devastating bit of information about her husband. And I thought it was beautifully written.
Now we'll have a transition coming up here to the Botanical Garden, which resulted from a cut that we made that'll be in the deleted scenes, which is Helena making the actual phone call to Frankie Flowers. And I guess for me, it was by cutting the phone call scene, it was a way to do 2 things. One, keep the momentum of the film going, but also to have the audience play catch up here. We've seen her find the strip with Frankie's name on it. And to my mind, showing the result of an action instead of showing the action allows the audience to sort of participate in the storytelling. And it's something that I keep trying to remind myself of on every movie, which is that you can do stuff like that. That often removing the event and showing, the consequence of that event are more interesting dramatically.
I want to use a bomb.
Clifton is remarkable.
I like the little of his camera throughout.
I remember seeing, I'd sort of invented this weird voice for Frankie Flowers. One of those things, again, just popped in my head, the way he talked. And I, it didn't matter particularly, but I remember seeing him walk across the parking lot outside in San Diego. And I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe his
even his walk.
Physicality.
Yeah, exactly.
Eduardo Ruiz is the only real witness against Carl.
We added this idea of like the kids' class sort of being there. It just seemed like a fun way to stage a scene like this, and kind of creepy. She's got her kid there with her. It's sort of a beautiful area. 2 people discussing a hit.
The twin themes of family and murder.
Exactly.
Together again.
I had a couple of people say I should cut this, which is interesting. Her leaving, I had some friends say, that she's going to leave and you should just go to the phone call, but I don't know. I liked seeing it.
Forest nymph.
Exactly.
Emerging from the sylvan.
Forest nymph looking for a quick high. Again, good actors sort of helping you turn what, you read this scene on the page and you would not think that it's about, D.W. Moffat, and yet through just some great eye work, it tells you everything about how he feels about this guy, the dynamic of their relationship.
He's charting something that's been happening off screen. It's very elegant, which is Michael Douglas's sort of realization that the family problem isn't going away. And D.W. Moffat does it all with his eyes. Like, this has been a real issue.
Marisol Sanchez, who plays Anna, very gifted young actress, and also, again, very sort of thorough and dedicated, and really has been in Tijuana a lot and was very helpful to us in talking about how this character would dress and behave. And for somebody like me, that's a huge help. These kind of scenes are fun to do because they're about what's not being discussed. And it's where Benicio really excels. He sort of realizes although it hasn't become apparent until later that basically Manolo is put him in a situation in which Javier is going to be taken down as well. That's really the logical conclusion.
I watched that scene and I'm so happy we didn't have it. They'd be having an affair or something.
Oh my God, I know.
This would be.
I know.
Think back on
that's.
I get a big cringe.
Believe me, there were things in early drafts of Sex Lies that I look back on and I wonder what was going on. I know, and I remember being very fixated on that idea that, like, oh yeah, he's in love with this guy's wife. I remember when that idea occurred to me, I thought, oh, Steve's going to really like this.
This is another one of these things I love. You wouldn't believe that Cincinnati has these kind of this location. It feels like a vast slum, and
it's actually that's not how big is that area of town? It's
small.
Yeah.
And it's around a park, and it's lovely old buildings. It feels sort of like Lower East Side of New York in a way.
And I would just, in the case of that montage, Michael driving around, I would be driving around with Michael, let's say with the mounted camera, and send Gary J off with the other camera.
Was that the shot you did where you put the camera in the middle of the street and you did the 360 where car goes one way and then she's walking the other?
And again, this is a sequence where I was trying to be a little more subjective than I might be normally in style. So I had Vante Sweet literally lying on top of me. I was using my little Aeroflex that I shot Schizopolis with. And he was doing his business right there.
You're a very attractive man.
I know. I had most of my clothes on at the time.
It was about 100 degrees that day, too.
It was really hot. And I even did a couple of versions, where he was in focus and the background was out of focus. And
I missed a line here that you ended up cutting. You took out, or I don't even know if I don't think you shot it. I don't know, where he says, "I'm going to feed this to you like a little birdie."
I think I did shoot that, and then decided
it's a little heavy, but
that the silence was really creepy, and those sounds coming out from the window of kids playing, which are on the track. I mean, there were kids playing outside this building. There's a sort of casualness to it that's sort of disturbing.
And I love he shoots her up in the foot so that no one will ever see. No evidence.
Right. Great detail there. The makeup, the little burn on the lips. She's wearing contacts there as well to make her pupils look large. Either that or she was high. I can't remember. No, there are very serious statutes on the book about shooting a scene like this. We had to have like a board between the two of them because she was 17. And in theory, nobody in Ohio had ever tried to enforce the statute. But in theory, as a minor, there were all these rules about what they're not allowed to do.
Cincinnati has a long history of coming in and plucking the artist right out of his...
Yeah. It was, so we had to, her mother was there all the time, and we had this piece of plywood, with a blanket on it, but it was crazy. I mean, she was perfectly fine. I mean, we explained all this to her, like how this had to be done, and this was the law and stuff like that. Now, this is a sequence again, where I went back and shot additional footage. These two shots, I went back and got very late in the game. I just found that things weren't clear enough. You weren't getting a good look at what was going on, and so I went back and picked up a couple of what I call JFK shots.
Is that the Tijuana cartel has realized that Frankie Flowers had been informing on them, and they've sent one of their own to take care of them.
That's our story, and we're sticking to it.
Doggone it. A careful review. I'm pretty sure that's what we were talking about.
I mean, we talked about it in the introduction to the screenplay, that it was something that we struggled with, this neatness of sort of a couple of things coming together at the right point, but we couldn't, which also occurs in the original, basically. And that, we tried again and again to sort of figure out, well, what if this happened? What if that happened? We could do it this way. We could do it that way. And every time we pulled a little string, the thing just seemed to collapse. This is a sequence, even in script stage, that you and I, had concerns about, because I think the most obvious question is, why does he want to kill him here and now?
It's awfully convenient. It wraps up a gigantic loose end, which is, it gets Frankie Flowers out of the story. It kills our partner, which helps sort of drive the emotional force or bring it for this last third of the movie or last whatever it is. And it's something that it came as a device that came out of the original miniseries. I never felt comfortable with it, and we just couldn't
solve it.
And we tried and tried and tried and tried.
And it's something that, again, even as we were finishing the film and screening it, I remember having conversations with friends of ours in which they would say, yeah, you're right, it's convenient, I don't know what else you're going to do.
And at the end of the day, looking at it really carefully, it's the exigency of telling the whole story. I mean, you just can't track all of these interstitial things that would have happened
to get him to that point.
And you don't have the room to build 3 or 4 other scenes in, so the movie goes off another direction, and you wrap up Frankie Flowers, and then you also kill the partner, and there isn't space. And at the end of the day, we just made it all happen at once and took a big, deep breath and moved on.
Yep.
Stop standing around. I want to walk.
I did come up with an idea. Did I tell you about the idea of how to do Louis getting blown up in the car differently? Well, later, of course, after the film was done and released, I came up with this idea that this would all play out as it does, but that you do a time cut, and Frankie Flowers would be on like the ambulance is there. You do a time cut. The ambulance is there. Frankie Flowers is on a gurney. And that's when Don gets a really good look at him, and he turns and looks just as Ray is getting into the car, like it hasn't even occurred to him, and that's when the thing
that's
blows
better.
up. I know, but it was too late.
Let's go back.
It was too late. What I do like about this sequence is the fact that building has such a great book depository feel to it, and how, to me, evocative the images of the scope sticking out of it. It still resonates somehow. We all see movies in which things take place and you go, oh, I don't know. And all I can tell people is that in our case, we do agonize over these things. I mean, we all read what was written about the movie, and there isn't any criticism that was leveled at us that we didn't think about, that wasn't discussed in great detail between you and I, or you and I and the producers, or,
We spent a long lot, dedicated movie professionals driving themselves absolutely.
And
over this stuff.
yeah, I mean, you go with what you feel on the day. Now, we were always looking for opportunities for characters to sort of cross, if not each other, at least cross locations. We have this idea of Manolo being in San Diego when the car bomb event goes down, and we come to find out again through some off-screen activity that they've picked up Javier. And I think the reason that we liked this idea was, I remember us talking about this speech of Manolo's in the car that he would make on the way to being driven out to the desert, that we liked that idea. I remember us talking about monologues in general, how rare it is in movies now for characters to have monologues, and how much we like those. And that there was a great monologue to be had by Manolo as they're driving him out.
Where he gets a little bit of redemption, where he, in the way you sort of dig him out, where he just wants the memory of Manolo to be positive for his wife. He's asking for forgiveness in a way.
He gets to retain some amount of dignity in the face of a pretty unfortunate set of circumstances. And that Javier sort of honors that when he goes back to see Anna at the end. I really liked, that he sort of honored his friend's last wish.
Javier no tuvo nada que ver con esto. Todo era idea mía. Castigan a mí, no a él.
Here we are out in the desert again. And in a situation like this, literally, it would be me with the camera and possibly even a 250-foot magazine jammed into the car. In this case, perhaps I wouldn't even have a focus puller because the actors aren't moving that much, and we would go. It's I think a fun way to work and a quick way to work. Normally, you might take a little more care, but since we were going for something kind of rough, it worked out.
I'm curious how you got those shots of the scenery. What was happening with the film when we were rolling out the car window? It's something really strange looking.
Well, I think it's that 45-degree shutter that's giving that really sort of a natural sense of movement. There's no blur, and you're accustomed in your life and in a movie to seeing some amount of blur. This was when we were shooting this scene. We were sort of running out of time. The sun had gone away, which at the time we were shooting, I thought was a really terrible thing, but turned out, I think, actually to be a good thing. And it, all of a sudden, as we started shooting it, it got really, really windy, which turned out to be a great thing because wind is sort of impossible to fake. If you create it, you've ruined your dialogue tracks. And sometimes it's a really nice effect to have. And we got lucky. It just picked up all of a sudden, and it really adds to the scene, I think. In this scene coming up, we sort of created on the spot out of a sense of, again, needing to clarify, what went down, why Javi wasn't killed, and also, to give you a sense of his. I think you feel here that his resolve is starting to, what's the word? Harden. That he can't be a part of this.
And it really helps with what happens at the end of the movie too, when they have Salazar in captivity and you don't know what they're doing to him. They're killing him. They're taking him out. They're torturing him, and it helps, I think, with the motivation.
This is what a friend of mine called the hardcore sequence, which was the Paul Schrader film. George C. Scott driving around at night.
Mr. Hardcore.
Yeah, looking for his daughter. This is very much out of that place. And also the whole film, I mean, all we did really was talk about 70s movies while we were working on this. And it was absolutely our desire that it recall the aesthetic of the movies we liked from the 70s. And again, these scenes are tough. Like, how much do they say? How much do they not say? What do you...
I remember Amy Irving asking you, saying, what if I lean over and put my head in his lap? And it's so much better than dialogue.
This is a tiny thing, but I was kind of happy with how these first two shots, a combination of the shots, again, we have some nice wind blowing and the music, hopefully creating an odd sense of dread or something. You know what I mean? The shot of the house with the open door, nobody's in it, then a shot looking through the door, and you're thinking, what's happening?
I think you did it also. I think you did it all through the scenes between the two of them. I think you did it in that one scene where you shoot in the reflection in the mirror, and she comes in and there's a curtain there, and you're seeing her through a curtain, and it feels like somehow it's happening in out of time or something. It's very unsettling.
This is a really terrific piece of acting by Benicio. In my view, these are very hard things to do. I mean, it's I don't know what to say. I mean, he knew what was required, but basically, you're driving down the street in Nogales with a camera mount, and I'm going, okay, I want to see the whole story play out on your face in about 30 seconds, and then you get out of the car. And to start with that idea and end up with what Benicio did is very nice. Here's a shot that we improvised on the spot, a 360-degree pan in the middle of an intersection in Nogales. This is all uncontrolled, me and the first assistant cameraman out in the middle of the street. And maybe 10 of those people are extras, and the rest of them are tourists and locals. That was part of the fun of being down there, is you could kind of do that.
Thank you for coming down.
Benjamin Bratt, who you just worked with on Abandon.
He's an incredible actor. I mean, I think I saw the movie a couple of times before I realized this was Benjamin Bratt.
A few people have, until they saw his name in the credits. They weren't sure it was him. But you gotta... One of the things that was most impressive about him was he was shooting another film. He was working nights. He took a plane, showed up on our location at 6 a.m. We threw him into makeup. He came out onto the set, and I remember after the first take, looking at Greg Jacobs, my assistant director, we just sort of turned to each other and went, "Gee, that was pretty good." He just, knew what the hell he was doing.
That is nothing new, senora.
He's terrific. I heard a funny story that he'd snuck, that you don't like any fake facial hair at all, and that he'd just shown up with the mustache and he snuck it by you, that it was a fake.
I had a feeling it wasn't his, but it looked good, and I let it fly. And of course, I'm wearing it now.
You look fantastic.
Thank you.
This was one of these things. I remember we were in my old apartment, and I had, in that morning's New York Times, had seen an article about the fact that they could reconstitute cocaine into sort of plastic or something. And it just sort of, in passing, I clipped it. And I remember you were sitting on my couch, and I said, listen to this thing. And I read it to you, and you're like, that's it. Use it. That's the device. That's fantastic.
And I know that it was a lengthy article in the Times about what a problem this would cause in theory, because they could change they were turning it into stuff that and masking the smell. And then I never read about that again.
I haven't seen a thing about it.
Me neither. This was 3 years ago, almost. Yeah. And I remember reading it thinking, this is just huge, and never read it about it again.
I love this little turn here where she's refused to do it.
Hey, you got to draw the line somewhere.
I want our debt forgiven. I want to be the exclusive distributor of Obregon.
It's a great little litany.
She's talking to it like it's a coffee brand or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Eduardo Ruiz killed.
Turn the corner, finally. Again, used to be a scene a lengthy scene that ended up on the floor, or at least in the back of your DVD, of her trying to get back over the border and being pulled over, and it was fun.
It's amazing when you were down there shooting on the border, and there were actual drug busts going on.
Oh yeah,
they were finding drugs everywhere, and under cars and undercarriages, and
Benicio's hair is wet here because we had shot the swimming pool sequence moments before, and Benicio had been told that I worked fast, but he had left the swimming pool, gone to his trailer, and somebody knocked on the door saying, "They're ready for you." And he said, "For what?" And they said, "The polygraph scene." Threw his clothes on, came upstairs, didn't have time to dry his hair, and decided he was just going to play it with wet hair.
You worry about getting me what I want. I'll worry about myself.
Again, we got lucky here. Available light. The sun was coming in, and I was moving as quickly as we could. We're running 2 cameras. It's part of the reason that, with the exception of that one shot from behind Benicio, I shot it all from one side of the room, because it was just looking good, and I sort of went with it. That's me in the trunk being stepped on by Benicio. This was also some of the first stuff that we shot with Benicio, if not the first stuff. I think the swimming pool and the polygraph are the first thing. And as you know now, the first day with any actor is a very anxious time. Even assuming that you get on with them and that you like them, it's all that first day. Those first couple of takes are always tricky because they're trying to figure out what kind of director you're going to be. You're trying to figure out what kind of director they want. And I remember with Benicio especially, and then you add the accent on top of it, and how's that coming across? And we fell into a rhythm fairly quickly, and it's really about trust. I mean, it's hard being an actor, believe me. I mean, you really do have to. You're so at the mercy of everyone else, and at the end of the day, if you don't believe the director when he or she says we've got it, you're an unhappy person.
I know I had a couple moments working with Benjamin where I thought I'd had it, and he said, come on, give me one more, and then that was the best one, and I filed away a valuable lesson.
No, that happens to me too.
I think it's incredible the way, having just shot a movie, and I say shot, but working with a great DP. I was watching Matthew Libatique, and I was watching him work, and it's incredibly exhausting. And I can't figure out how you were able to operate, light, direct this movie. It's seems to me like full 3 18-hour day full-time jobs, and I mean, let's see, that's 54 hours in a day, and so it's remarkable, and nobody does it.
Well, there are a couple people actually. Doug Lyman
Doug
shot his own film, and Peter Hyams shoots his own films. I don't know. It seemed organic to me. That's the way I started, and it seemed like an organic thing to do. And again, the fact that I'm not as exacting as a proper DP buys me the time to work with the actors if I need to. It buys me the time to, if I get halfway through a setup that I don't like, I can say tear it down, start over again. And at minimum, it reduces the number of people in the room and contributes, to a sense of proximity with the actors that I enjoy, and I hope that they enjoy as well. There's really no substitute for looking through the lens with the shutter going at the actor. It's the closest thing to seeing it on a screen as you can get. It's different than even seeing it in person, and it's certainly different than a monitor. And I was operating the B camera on, I'd shot Schizopolis, but I was operating the B camera on the Limey, and I operated on Aaron, and I decided on Traffic to try and make the leap. And most of the time I was glad I did. It's certainly impossible for me to go back now. To insert somebody in that process now would be a problem, I think. So I've just got to keep learning. This was an example of us trying to activate Robert a little bit.
Yeah, he gets to take charge. He grabs him out of the classroom. I thought Topher was tremendous in this scene. He articulates that thing I was saying earlier, that the economy is driven by people sort of from much more privileged environs, and it allows us to have this sort of, some reductionary system of black drug dealers, white customers.
Okay, right now, all over this great nation of ours, 100,000 white people from the suburbs are cruising around downtown, asking every black person they see, you got any drugs? You know where I can score some drugs?
And I know that in the scene when he was doing it, Topher was tremendous, and he was just so amazed that he was getting to yell at Michael Douglas. And he was sitting in the front seat of this car, yelling at this actor who's a hero of his, and he couldn't believe his fortune.
And there's a line at the end of the scene that I ended up cutting. You can see Michael building up to it, where he takes a long pause and says, "You're really beginning to piss me off." And I ended up cutting it because in the context of the whole movie, I thought maybe that's a little dirty Harry. But
a little dirty Harry, yeah.
But the point is that the third time we did it, Michael came over to me and said, "I think I might get a little loud on this one." I said, "Okay, I'll tell Paul Ledford, our sound mixer." So we did it, and Michael, at the end of the scene, screamed at Topher, "You're really beginning to piss me off." And Topher's face just sort of fell. And I said, "Cut, great." And I wound Topher up for half a day. I came over to him. I said, "I think Michael's really upset." And he said, "What? Really?" But what a great young actor.
Tremendous. And just getting to articulate just love these smart kids who have the world figured out. You know, you're never more certain than when you're 16. He knows everything. And
Fonte's really great too.
Put your ass in a dumpster.
I got money.
Got money.
I got $1,000 in my wallet. It's for you.
If I want your money, man, I would take your
Again, this is a sequence that we would have shot very, very quickly, just popping around one angle to the next, and sort of, I think probably an hour and a half, top to bottom to get this sequence. It just, kind of keep the machine running.
I like too that what he says just sort of turns the normal relationship on its ear. I don't need your money, and
Yeah,
Get
the
away
idea
from
that right,
I'm a businessman.
that you're doing something for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now here we're continuing sort of Robert clocks that Seth actually does know where Caroline is through how he speaks. And this was part of the activating Robert plan that was hatched out of necessity in a way. As many people know, we'd approached Michael first, and he said, I think this is a terrific project, but I think Robert's very passive, and I don't know what to do with it. And if you're going right now, I have to take a pass. I don't want to be the guy who comes in and tells you to rewrite the movie for me, because it's not that kind of movie. And I said, oh, God, okay. And then sort of by no effort of ours, Harrison Ford sort of had read the script and got interested. And in speaking to him about how to activate Robert, you and I came up with this idea of him sort of using Seth as a homing beacon, to get to her. And I think it helps the emotional journey of his character, I think, a lot.
It's such a powerless situation. Your daughter's missing. You have no idea where. And it's, I think, infinitely relatable. My 16-month-old son, I look at him periodically and I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah. This was a nice thing that Marisol came up with on the day, this idea of ironing the clothes and folding them in preparation for getting rid of them, which she said would be part of her ritual, that she would have the little shrine in the corner and that she would get his clothes together and then burn them. And I thought that was a pretty fascinating way to deal with his death. Some more hardcore material here. Michael following Topher.
The blue light really doesn't give you a sense of how hot it was that day.
No, it doesn't. Funny thing, totally off the point, while we're shooting in this hotel, which we sort of shot as is, at one point I was standing behind the counter and there was a book with a list of names of people who were blackballed, who were not allowed to stay in the hotel anymore, and why. And it was one of the most fascinating things I've ever read. In retrospect, I should have stuck it in my bag. You wouldn't believe what some people were up to.
I think this is one of the moments that obviously registers. The Hi Daddy.
Yeah, really a pretty amazing reading by Erica. And again, available light here. We're walking in and shooting, and I would be trying to move as quickly as I can with both cameras to keep the actors as fresh as possible.
Hi, Daddy.
It's funny, I shot extreme close-ups of Michael breaking down over her, and opted for a sort of more distant approach, particularly this last shot here in the doorway. And I remember when Michael saw the film, he said, I'm so pleased at the way you did that. He said, I think I knew you shot that other stuff, and actually I thought it would play better, sort of a little looser, and I think he was right.
This is one of my favorite speeches in the movie. I love Ruiz has gotten to know Don Cheadle a little bit now. He's Monty, and he takes the opportunity to give him a little insight.
He's got a pretty good overview of the situation. and a sort of unassailable logic. And you sense that Don knows that, but it doesn't matter. He just can't. I mean, we interviewed a lot of people who are in that situation, and all of them said, I just they focus on the day to day. They just get up every day and they go, if I can
reduce it by 1/10 of a percentage point, then everything's okay.
Yeah, I mean, they just keep going to work, and more than that, I found that they weren't that dogmatic. That their attitude was, look, this is my job.
Not at all.
As of today, this stuff's illegal. I have a job. I'm in law enforcement. I want to do a good job. I want to take pride in my work.
Can't you for 1 second imagine that none of this had happened? That my drugs had gone through? What would be the harm? Huh? What would be the harm? A few people get high who are getting high anyway. Your partner's still alive.
And then there's Miguel Ferrer saying your whole life was pointless. Just remember you work for a drug dealer too.
Right.
Which, in the system of informants that we use to fight the war on drugs, the information's always given out for a reason, a lot of times. And I loved you found a way to link this idea from the very beginning with Thomas Millian and Benicio, the anonymous ones, and then Michael Douglas's character was talking about informers and losing farms, and then it just sort of weaves through in a way,
percolating in the background.
It can't, and it surprised me.
And this is a moment. This whole the way this sequence plays out is something from the original that I always thought was one of the great.
Yeah,
the first time I saw
you loved it.
You like it? I like it more than you.
I think you might have liked it a little more.
Oh, I know I did, because I thought the first time I saw the show, I just thought it was just great.
Okay, 1 second.
I don't know what else could we have done.
It's convenient.
Frankie shoot them.
It's beautiful, but
Call the ambulance. Call the ambulance.
No, it is, but it's just, I don't know. To me, it's one of those great movie moments. The second knock, and the guy saying breakfast, and you just,
Oh shit! Hold on.
and the cycle of life continues here.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen.
Carl gets
because of the sudden
to start over again.
Release, the people have determined that we.
I love that cocky nod to the judge.
Oh.
Like they're
Oh. Now, in my opinion, good endings are always somehow about the beginning, and I think the mirror image of the drug bust was something that early on we talked about a lot. It's just it's a nice way to show how things have changed and yet how they haven't. There's been a lot of discussion about the degree to which Javier is complicit in Salazar's death. And we sort of left it kind of ambiguous. It could be one of two things. Either he made it happen or it happened without his knowledge, and he assumes the guy just had a heart attack and died, because his expression when he sees Salazar is very opaque.
The actual death of, this was based on a character, a real person, General Boyo, as I said, and
we never figured out if he was still alive.
We don't know what happened to Raboyo, and his own ending is ambiguous. And I'd always thought that the actual drugs that Javier was going after here were actually the same drugs, the drugs that had been seized at the beginning.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think we probably could have gone even further to make that clear. I always felt they were. And it kills me that in the scene with Topher and Erica, where he gets her to do the drugs, that the little packet that he pours into the spoon could have had the scorpion on it. I should have shot an insert of that. It was really stupid.
I was always worried that this would seem would hurt his character, that it seemed like he was a murderer now, and you said no, this if people interpret that way, then it'll seem like revenge for how Salazar murdered his friend, and I think that's true.
Yeah.
Now, I think there are a lot of things you hope for when you make a movie like this. The first is that you'll get to make it, and the second is that you'll get to make it the way you see fit. The third is that people will go to see it. And then I think in the back of our minds, we hoped that it might, provoke some sort of discussion on some level of the drug war in general and what's going on. We've been fighting it the same way for a long time, and there doesn't seem to be much result other than a lot of people going to jail.
It's that issue, and the film I think articulates it, that you're waging war on a part of human nature. The part of person that feels this kind of emptiness and wants to fill it up with something, and it can be all sorts of things. It could be alcohol or gambling or all these different things that start the cycle, and it's very hard to isolate that part of a human and root it out and put it in jail. And
also you have to, when you're discussing our policies, you need to be able to distinguish between what ought to be done in some pie in the sky world and what realistically can be done when you take into account that there are politics involved and there are people that need to be elected or want to be elected, and that the most convenient stance to take on this issue is a hardline stance. It's a popular stance. And the sad result of that is that any sort of, as we said, out-of-the-box thinking or any sort of progressive idea has a very, very difficult time taking hold. It's always attacked as being soft on drugs. How can you like drugs?
I think it's fascinating. You look at what happens, and the laws are enforced so sporadically and unevenly. The poor person who has no resources and no lawyer, who ends up with one set of circumstances. Let's say Hollywood, success story who ends up caught with drugs gets a totally different situation. And I watch it all the time from my viewpoint. I say it's so obvious why they don't throw the book at famous people, because it starts to illustrate how ridiculous it is. I mean, when some casual user who's just clearly a sick person is going to go do 5 years in jail, well, when it's a famous person, you pay attention. You go, that's ridiculous. This person has a healthcare problem. And yet now they're going to be locked up in a federal prison for having a gram and a half of cocaine. Well, that happens to poor people all the time. Our jails are filled with people like that.
This was a scene, again, where Michael sort of impresses one with his abilities and professionalism. A tough scene to do. He knows exactly what he's doing, and because he does, it enables me to really sort of shoot it in any way that I want, because I don't have to worry about whether he's going to get burned out or whether he's going to peak here or there, or
he's incredible, because this is a scene I think that could be, it's a quit in the big rousing speech, and he underplays it. He goes against it completely, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah, a very impressive guy, and part of it, I think, is his, he's also a filmmaker. He's a producer, and his understanding of what you're going through is so clear that, I don't know, made my day pretty easy. We stole this shot outside of the White House, and 2 seconds after I cut, there was a downpour. But we managed to sneak Michael into the White House, and then turned him loose, and I had the camera.
I remember standing on the corner, and it was incredible. Michael can pick up the phone and call, one of the cabinet members. He's got cabinet members he can just call up and say, "Is there any way I can come in the White House for just a second and walk out?" And then there's all this protocol that's being skipped over, and you're standing around with your camera crew, and he's talking to, I can't remember who.
I can't remember. We shouldn't say anyway. I'm sure it was somebody up there.
It was very interesting.
But it's kind of sad, they've shut down that street now because of there were those drive-by shootings at the White House a few years ago, and they have no plans to open it up again. You can walk, but you can't drive in front of the White House anymore.
We're obviously coming into the end here, and this is one of the places I think coming up where the thread of the Arnie-Helena relationship is just the bare minimum amount of information that still cracks. and you're landing this relationship and this sort of implied thing that happened off screen and
or didn't. I mean, it's very, very vague, which I don't mind. But we had a lot of discussions about the ending in general, how to land the whole film.
We had 3 storylines, and I know in my original draft I had written, I had down endings. I didn't have them planning the bug, and I didn't have Caroline ending up in treatment. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I think that you said something, and we had argued back and forth. You said that this is a long movie, there's a lot of information, and you need to leave the audience with some hope. And it was a very passionate discussion.
Yes, it was. No, I think you had. We had drafts where they take Caroline home, and he was Robert was downstairs having a drink in the middle of the night, and upstairs we sort of
you'd have the camera outside the house going around the back.
She comes out of the window,
and he's got that self-satisfied. He's having his scotch. It's 2 a.m.
People would have set fire to the theater.
It's great. The window above the garage goes open. A foot appears, a leg, and she scampers off into the night. And it's that idea of, would this recovery process take for a person who's 16 years old and still, despite where she's ended up, still sort of on top of the world? The catch net around someone like that, I'd always joke the worst thing that happens to her, she goes to Middlebury instead of Harvard.
Right.
At that point in her mind, I think that's true. And you said you said, this is a snapshot. This doesn't have to be forever. This is what's going on today. There's hope. There's hope today. She's in a meeting and she's doing well, and her parents are there. And I had to ask myself over and over and over whether I found that believable, and I do ultimately. And actually, at the end of the day, I think you're right.
Well, I certainly felt like I mean, I didn't look at that scene with her, at that meeting and feel like, oh, she's fixed. I mean, I literally took it. She, to me, in that scene is day to day. And I felt, I hoped, that would come across, that this is today. This girl could tip, those pressures are extreme.
One of the things I love about it is it's her family's there, and it's the way it does work. When it works.
Yeah.
I love this Don's little jog and his happy.
Well, that idea, which I use a couple of times in the film, of sort of staying with a character for a long time as you see a transition occur, whether it's Michael in the back of the cab when he leaves the White House, or Don here when he leaves the Ayala house, is a total lift from Battle of Algiers. There are these sequences in which you're just hanging on this character as they move through a space, and you're watching them think. And it's one of the things that films do so well that you don't get to see very often, which is show people thinking, showing them come to some realization. I find it really compelling, and I'm surprised that you don't see it more often.
This moment with Carolyn talking, all the sort of recovery rhetoric in the movie is pretty accurate and taken from, there's a lot of truthfulness to it. And here she's just, she's basically saying, it's really hard. It's really hard. The only, she, I'm sure, remembers all the drug dealers' phone numbers, and she doesn't think she's won the war now.
Right.
And this is a direct result of this was probably the struggle of the movie, was figuring out, as we've touched on, how active to make his character. And, here at the end, he says, this is a man who went to Washington to win the war on drugs.
Barbara and I are here to support our daughter, Caroline. And we're here to listen.
And he's been reduced to basically just saying, I'm going to take a beat and listen because I'm baffled.
Right. Am I mistaken? As written, was Javier at the baseball game? Because Benicio tells the story that I was going to shoot this, and I sort of sent word out and I can't remember if it was because it was in the script or whether clearly at a certain point I decided, well, of course he should be there. And I can't remember.
I don't know. I don't know.
Because I remember,
It's so beautiful.
Well, he tells it like he wasn't supposed to be there, and I called and said, you got to be there. And now, obviously, we look at it and think, well, of course he should be there. But I honestly can't remember.
It's funny. I think about this in such an odd way. I think that, I don't know if this is how you intended it or not, or even it's anything I was thinking, but it just feels so otherworldly, it feels like, it feels like an after death sequence to me or something, that it's, because Javier's character, I mean, he's a dead man. I mean, that was the line that, I think that cop said to us, that, it was the life expectancy of the people in law enforcement is just very short. And, somebody's gonna get to you. Is it a line that was cut from the script too? I think, from the movie was, we had a last scene with Michael Douglas and Benicio, and he says, Michael asks him, is it possible to be the drug czar of Mexico and not be in the pocket of one of the cartels? And Javier's answer is, yes, if you're willing to die.
Right.
And I think that idea, at least for me, I can't separate it from that baseball scene. I think
right. Well, as we reach the conclusion here, credits start to roll. There was a tiny little, there was a tempest in a teapot over the cinematographer credit. I attempted to get directed and photographed by, and received a waiver from the Directors Guild and the Cinematographers Guild, but was hung up by the Writers Guild, who said, you're inserting a credit between the director and the writer, and we don't allow that. And I sort of knew that was coming, but I thought I'd ask anyway. So I decided to separate the two credits and employ a pseudonym. So I took the name Peter Andrews, and that's my father's first two names. And since he was the one who turned me on to movies, I thought it was appropriate. And I actually got a call not long ago from someone in the Writers Guild saying, we'd be willing to allow you to take the directed and photographed by credit on the next film that you do, if you still want to. And the weird thing is, I decided, no, I kind of like it the way it is. It was sort of, it was, it ended up being a nice tribute, and now I kind of like the alter ego of it. So
I think, I don't know, I'm biased, but I think it cost Peter Andrews an Academy Award.
I don't think so. He's a cranky, overpaid. I have my suspicions. Drug user.
Well, it's obvious from that crazy color.
Yeah, what's going on with that?
Movie. I mean, it's clear that the guy is on a hallucinogen.
Nobody sober would shoot a film that looks like this.
No way.
I think USA Today called this the worst photograph film of the year.
I think they're probably right. But if you're on acid, it's actually the best.
Exactly. But it's another paycheck.
I thought the
should we comment on all the
makeup department head was actually, she was amazing. Location manager Ken Lavitt, I think, deserves an unbelievable special credit mention.
We're not kidding. Actually, Ken Lavitt is who is the location manager. I can't even remember how many locations we had and how much we shot. We shot 9 cities, standing in for 7 cities, and 54 days, and we would travel and shoot on the same days whenever we would
flying around on a plane. And Ken, as the writer, I obviously sometimes at the front end I had something in my imagination, maybe, or even something I've seen, and I'm sticking it in, and never talked to him. And you communicating what you're looking for, or the script's communicating, or however that's working. These things, I would see them, and they're almost identical to stuff I pictured, and it's almost impossible.
No, and also, that's phase 1, and then you've got Phil Messina coming in and sort of, turning this thing into exactly what's in your mind's eye. And it's sort of a misconception, I think, that when you're not building sets, that a production designer's job is sort of easy. In many ways, it's so much harder. You have no control. You're very limited in the amount of time that you have to come in, prep the location in the way that it needs to be done, which often involves like completely repainting.
Oh, he's making paint chip off the wall that looks like it was 100 years old.
And then you got to turn it back into that.
The entire streets, everything leading around Cincinnati, all those streets were completely redone to look a very certain way. It's remarkable.
No, well, luckily Phil on Ocean's 11 got to flex his design muscles a little bit, which I told him, if you just got to bear with me on this one. You're gonna get to build lots of stuff on Ocean's 11, but it was really the whole shoot was it was such a blur to me. I don't know about you, but it was. I felt like we were hanging on by our fingernails every day, but at the same time, I'm glad we didn't have another week, because I think that energy sort of translated.
I do too. It was baffling. I don't know how you kept it all in your
I'm just sorry it didn't translate into this commentary.
How do we need? You should have given us half the time and made it 100 degrees in here.
Yeah, exactly.
Could have pulled it off.